Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ConTech Exec podcast. I have got Adam Krob from Boh Bros here today. Adam, good to see you. Adam is the Director of Information Technology at Boh Bros, based out of New Orleans, right? I was just in New Orleans not too long ago.
Nice. You get some good food?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that's the
most important part.
The reason. Yeah, that's most of the reason you come, right? Is you're there for it. You know, Adam and I, we've had, you and I, we've had some discussions before. You're a prolific writer on the topic of AI and construction technology. I have a hard time kind of keeping up with all the things that you write, but I do my best. But today I think we're going to talk a little bit about something very, very important and utilizing kind of AI in the safety field. And one of the questions that I kind of sent over to you before we kind of got started was, what is your advice for balancing automation with human sense in like safety critical settings?
So first off, I think this is a great topic because it kind of gets to the core of some of the challenges, some of the concerns that we have about AI, and sort of approaches to AI that I think can work in a safety sensitive situation, and particularly, and not just, safety, very narrowly construed, but, the way that we conduct a safe job site and the way that we continue to use AI in a safe way in planning and scheduling and all of those sorts of things. I think one of the things that is most important is that AI is a perspective. It really isn't a truth. It isn't a ironclad guarantee. It is a way for you to get different perspectives. And so when you start thinking about, how will AI fit into safety narrowly defined, it's something that we've been exploring with tools that analyze our 360 walks and point out potential safety hazards. And we found that to be a really great perspective. We sit with our subcontractors on our weekly sub meetings and we say, okay, look, let's go over the things we found during our weekly walk. And it provides, I think, nicely an ability for us to sort of have a proof point that is a little bit less of, oh, well, the GC is just on my case again. But no, this is what the AI is seeing. And the nice thing is, at least with the one that we've been playing with, they then link it back to the OSHA standard. And so you get the opportunity to both, get that external perspective, but also link it to what really is the gold standard of the information about safety, which is that OSHA standard. And so you not only get, okay, this is a problem, but why is it a problem? And I think that that's where I find very interesting kind of thinking about the different, thinking about AI in the safety realm, is that it gives us an opportunity to even have almost a teachable moment where we're saying, okay, not only are we going to give you what the inspection says, we're going to give you context around that so that you learn better. It's something that we've struggled with a lot in AI more generally. I think everybody's a little concerned about it kind of taking away people's decision-making power.
So I wanted to ask you about that. Because you're in this space and you're you're utilizing the tool as kind of I'll say a source of truth, not the source of truth, right? What has been your experience between the human sense of these things when you ask, say, hey, look, here's the things that we're finding, right? Is it AI always correct, or is it, sometimes correct, sometimes not? Is it 90%? What's been your current experience with it? I don't know if you've got a big enough data set on that, but what's your thoughts?
I think we're getting 85, 90%. And I think that that's probably going to be as good as we get, at least now. We are trying to train it to get better, but it is more like 85 to 90% rather than 100%. And in safety sensitive situations, we definitely need that 100%. and that's going to be a little bit of a challenge getting there. But what we also have said is like, look, you know, we're not going to use this as our definitive, measure of whether we're safe or not. That
Yeah.
definitive measure is always going to be the human. But because you get things like sometimes it says, oh well, um, you've got a electrical cord in water, and it turns out that it was a water hose. So and those are things that you know in some ways it's erring in the right direction, which is it's
At least,
identifying something that
yeah, right. At least, hey, go check this out. Is that
yeah,
right? You know,
exactly.
I
And
don't think that's
so
any different than what a human would do if they were like,
right.
let's just say you had a camera, remote camera, you were looking across a job site, just, manually, basically, right?
Hmm.
Virtually looking at a job site. And you go, hey, what is that down there, man? You might want to go check that out. That doesn't look quite right.
Exactly.
Right.
And so it's sort of that same concept. And so you get kind of that you get maybe an overreach a little bit, but again, in safety situations, it's better to be over than to be under. 100%.
Yeah. Are
So
you getting a lot of pushback on this? I'm sure you probably don't hear it from the meetings, but I mean, do you kind of ear to the ground kind of thing? The do the guys in the field grumble a little bit about this?
when we first started, we had a couple of safety team members who came to us and said, "You're trying to take away my job." And we said, "Absolutely 100% not. That this is not what we want to do. We want to use this as a way for us to enhance the value that you drive, not to take away." And when you think about it, like one of the fundamentals of safety uh, practices is that the more observations you have, the more near misses you have, the safer your job is. The more often we're out there looking, finding things, the safer you're going to be. So, it's true in the airline industry. The airlines with the most uh, observations of potential safety hazards are the ones that are flying the best because they're looking really hard and they're finding a lot. So, in some ways, you think about it in the same concept or the same perspective, and you say, okay, well, look, this AI is just finding additional things for us to look at, and
Yeah.
it's expanding our perspective. And then when you start like expanding out the capabilities of AI and thinking about, okay, more generally, what else could it provide other than just finding something? You start saying, okay, this might be really interesting because give me 5 different approaches to this situation and the pluses and minuses and the risks of taking each one of these steps. Um, and it really can do some great things. Or analyze my current uh, you know upcoming scopes of work and tell me what safety wise I might be missing. We found something that we really hadn't identified in our JSA plan, and it was like really important. It was a high pressure gas line that we were potentially going to dig and expose, and we're like, okay, we need to specifically plan for that because it was providing gas service for a good bit of the parish, and by interacting with that AI, it wasn't that it told us what to do, but it gave us the perspective that we needed to be able to then say, okay, well, we're smart people. We've done this 15 times before. What is it that we really ought to worry about with this? And, maybe we ought to call in additional expertise from the utility and figure that out because, they just marked it. They didn't say, oh, well, by the way, this is really super important.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I've always, I don't know if I'm a fence sitter. There are things that I see about, utilizing the tool as it is or as an assistant. I, I've come up with this idea that, the guys in the field, the teams in the field, they don't necessarily want another tool to work with because they've got plenty, right? And tools mean that's I got to go use it and that takes time, those kind of things. But they are looking for an assistant, somebody that knows what's next,
Hmm.
somebody that can, say, hey, by the way, a little reminder, I know you're going to go do this. So I can see its true value. But then, you are going to get those folks. Hey, you're trying to take away my job. You're trying to take away
Right.
my job. And it's a valid assumption because if you think about it, we are training the model so that maybe, because, even to your point, we're going for 100%,
Yep.
right? We are training the model to be better than what we've been in the past, even though it's for a good cause, right? It's for a great cause of safety, making sure everybody goes home, those types of things. That's where I think, the idea is we kind of need some guardrails here, right?
And Robert, I think you hit the right word, which is guardrails. We need to understand, like, where do we feel comfortable implementing AI and where do we not feel comfortable? And that's going to shift over time, obviously. One of the things that this last week with ChatGPT 5 coming out is that several of the people who have really run it through its paces have said it does not hallucinate as much as the other models do. It's not just going to outright lie to you when it doesn't know what to say, which has been a problem and something that we really have to address. But I do love the idea that we can start relying on that a little bit more, and also for it to be a little bit more thoughtful and say, "Oh, by the way, I really don't know the answer to that."
Critical thinking amongst the youth of our, industry. Um, I don't know how many times I've asked, some folks about. I get just a question about something when they're checking their phone or whatever they're doing. I'm like, how are you going to function, in a critical situation where you have 30 seconds to answer something, or you've got a minute, you've got to do, and you can't, you know, Chat GPT it. You can't Google it, right?
Right.
You need to know your business, basically. What's your thoughts about that? Because I think, again, when we start talking about guardrails, these are things we need to know this information like the back of our hand, and yet hand, not ham, but we need to know this information. How? Give me your. I'm sure you've thought about it.
About it. And I love the idea of guardrails because this is something that we were talking about actively incorporating into our guidance documents on use of AI in our company. Lots of conversations about that lately. The so my first feeling is that personally, I I always write for myself first, and that to me is kind of like one of the things that I do frequently is I get ChatGPT to help me refine, but I never really let it write it for me in the first place. And so we need to be teaching our next generation how to use the tools just for themselves and use it as another perspective but learn for themselves. And so it has been very interesting. I've been working with the interns this summer that we had, and we really made AI use a um, sort of a core focus for us. And it's been interesting having conversations on the side with them. I was at our quarterly meeting and talked to one of our interns about what his experience has been. And he was very positive. He said, "Look, I think you guys are being thoughtful about it. You're saying try it, use it, but don't replace that experience of being in the field and making those decisions and understanding why those decisions are being made." Um, I heard from somebody the other day that construction generally has this really weird U-shaped curve in terms of our labor pool. We've got a lot of super experienced people who have been there for 35 years and superintendents and project executives and folks who've been a long time. And they have a very young group. We have kind of a missing middle, um, and I think that that definitely bears out in like thinking about my own company. And so we have an imperative to hand that knowledge off more effectively, but also hand that experience off more effectively. And I think that's going to be the most important part is that experience. So, and then second of all is that we're trying to design systems with, like they're sort of two, two different ends of the spectrum in using AI. One is automation, like we can just automate the crap out of something, and the other is sort of augmentation or enhancement. And so we have been definitely on the enhancement side of that. So one of the areas we've been spending a whole lot of time on is the submittal process, because it is a like thankless job. Nobody likes doing it, but it
Everybody
is
hates it.
really fundamental to young people learning about materials and how they're used on a construction site. Like, nobody wants to do it. Everybody would be just as happy to automate it out of existence, but it provides a really great learning ground for people to understand. Our new assistant project managers need to understand this. They need that experience. And so I'm finding it very interesting having those conversations about how do we build an interface that gives them a way to learn, but also helps them through some of the mundane part of, scrolling through.
You said this as a quote: "Those who act faster with AI will be the ones who win."
Yes.
And what I'm hearing you say is acting faster with AI means using it as a
Hmm.
augmented tool, not as a replacement tool, right? So
Right.
your advice to other contractors who are out there trying to looking at the system, looking at what their future is, you know what does that look like for them if they're going to try to step into this realm?
I think it's a strategic choice. I think there are strategic choices along several different perspectives. And I wrote about this last week, and I even did a little fun tool where you can go, it'll adjust the, three or four different dials, and it'll say, what should your strategy be like? It'll spit out a prompt that you can then throw into ChatGPT, which is a little fun. But it's a choice, and I think we're all going to have to be making those choices. So, one of the things that, as we look at different areas of the construction life cycle, both front of office and back of office, like, what are the things that are really adding value to us as builders and that are core to the way that we do our work? And what are things that are just overhead? And for just overhead, if it's just, it's like matching receipts to invoices. Like, if we can get a first pass that automates 95% of that, yes, please. I mean, let's you know, let's then be more selective and be more, you know, uh, focused on the outliers and then our audit of that, in some sort of randomized function, rather than spending the time of just searching and finding and, you know, bugging that foreman who has a concrete ticket in his back pocket that, he in the jeans he was wearing last week.
Yeah, we're missing something over here. Where is it?
Yeah, exactly. Or even, like we just received 50 tons of steel. What is it that you got from the barge? Like,
Yeah,
we really need that. Can you please send that to us? The though I think that we need to be making a strategic choice. My personal feeling is I would much rather err on the side of sort of like enhancement and, engagement with the humans, and providing the humans with more value and more perspective, rather than just simply automating it. I mean, like, let's let the AI do what it does really well, like things like summarize. Like, AIs are so great at summarizing and at pulling information out. One of the prompts that we've been working on are scraping prompts for websites for opportunities. The amount of time that pre-construction people spend looking at 20 different websites every week to see if is there an opportunity that we like or not, you're going to get a really good summary, And then you're going to go back and say, oh, well, those two look really interesting to me that came out this week.
Yeah,
Those kinds of things.
it's the filter, right?
Yes.
It's the filter of, okay, finding the right prompts. First of all, there's a whole new field of prompt engineering, right? It's a whole
Hmm.
new thing. But finding the right words in order to narrow down the, I guess, targets that you're looking
Yes.
for, right? Now, I've always been on the kind of the back end, seeing maybe what um, what AI can do from a data standpoint that you collect. Um, you know, whether it's time tracking, productivity, but it has to be, of course, valid data. And then, because I feel like, and it's a true statistic, yeah, like 95% of the data that's collected in construction never gets used,
Right.
right? It's unused, and maybe that's simply just because it's not validated. It's just you're not parsing it correctly. That it's siloed. You can't find it. It's not in a like a data lake or those types of things. Um, Give me your thoughts on that, because I think that's another area of like critical thinking where we're making strategic decisions based upon oh is
Yes.
it the wind, or is it is it your AI analysis? Like, kind of, what do you think about that? Have you touched that?
So this is an area that I'm actually really excited about because I think that AI can solve something that's really critically problematic for us, which is the reason we don't use all that data is because a lot of it's really bad.
Hmm.
And it comes, it's not because people want it to be bad. It's because the people people don't think like computers. And, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get people who are builders to think like database engineers. And what we really need is we need a layer in between. And I think the data capture and validation at the point of entry with AI prompts is going to be something we see a lot of really soon. I've talked to a couple of companies that are doing voice for gathering quantities and time from the field. I think that that's an exciting possibility. You start thinking about ways that we can allow team members who traditionally have not been really great at giving us high quality data and prompting them through questions and answer sessions with a simple AI that just says, "Oh, by the way, saw that it rained today. Did you guys rain out, or so do you just want to throw some show up time on that on your crew, or were you guys able to get back to work after the rain came through?" Those kinds of things that the AI has the perspective of the GPS located rain amounts, which we get from, open sources like, Weather Underground, where we have hundreds of thousands of individual weather stations at GPS locations. We can get pretty close to what the actual rain was, not, at the airport 35 miles away.
Yeah, right. And I too think about that as well, where we can take that data once we know that it's valid, right? We've got a GPS location, we've got a date, um, we've got who created it, where they were, so we can
Hmm.
kind of cross reference both of those pieces and get valid data, and then take that valid data and then analyze it. I always think about this when I was running my own, company, those types of things. I thought, how much time, or how much time am I, losing, or what's downtime, and then beyond that is what jobs am I taking on that aren't making me any money?
Hmm.
What are the processes that I'm losing money on? I mean, and you've got the CSI standard report where you're kind of breaking down into all your different GC categories, and then it
Exactly.
gets even more narrow on those. And again, a lot of folks don't want to get into those weeds, but sometimes those are very, very important when you start to look at it. It's like, man, I really kind of lost my shirt on this job. How did that happen? And you know, if you're not taking the data in to go where it's at, you're kind of making guesses. And with large jobs, capital projects, and those types of things, those numbers can be, monstrosities. I just did a podcast on this kind of thing where, 99% of capital projects right now are what they call mega projects, or, already overruns,
Yeah.
schedule overruns. And then, 80% of those jobs are over budget already. That's, in those senses, it's just, it's devastating, to some.
And, one thing too, I absolutely agree. So two thoughts on that. One is that gets back to this idea of the people who use AI to get faster or better. Because if we are gathering that information at the point and getting validated, then that analysis becomes quicker and we can act more quickly. The principle in software engineering is always to shift left. Like it's always cheaper to solve a problem earlier in the process, and
Hmm.
that's true in construction as well. When we're
Right.
building things, it's a heck of a lot better for us to change where the embed is before we pour the concrete than after.
Right. Yeah.
The those kinds of things. But the second thing that I'm very excited about is something I was experimenting with. I was building some AI agents with my project management software. We can we can provide additional context around you know specific areas in project management. What I did is I built a little agent that if you put in an observation, it searched all of the other observations and in the last 3 months on that job and said, "Oh, by the way, we're starting to see a pattern here." So it's
Yeah.
going to
Pattern
start
recognition. Yeah.
building that pattern for us, and then it provides a link to those, and then it adds that to the observation for you to then be able to say, "Oh, well, let me look at those other two observations. Maybe we have a problem with the stair tread material that we're using on these exterior stairs. Like we've seen this three different places. There's clearly a problem. Let's assign this to somebody." You can start saying, okay, well, we can feed into that very quick response data and solve that problem much more quickly.
Yeah. And I think I love that idea about historical data. It would be great to be able to kind of restore some of the data that many of these companies have. Smaller businesses probably, not collecting the same amount of data. Medium-sized businesses maybe just in the beginning stages of that. Um, and a lot of them aren't going to get into the weeds on these types of things. One of the questions I did want to talk to you about was folks are looking to start
Hmm.
um, down this road. Um, how should these businesses, and it doesn't have to be smaller or medium sized, but I guess we talked about practical benchmarks for
Hmm.
this new tech, whether it's AI or anything. From your perspective, what's a practical starting point? Where do you start from?
So I would suggest do not try to do a big bang. Get focused. Look for a particular um, tool that fits a particular outcome that you want to drive to. Like one of the things that we have investigated and have had real success with are some degree of AI automation in the takeoff process.
Mm.
And the time to take off was one of the things that was a big challenge for us because it just takes too bloody long for our pre-con department to do a takeoff, and we would love to do that more frequently. So if we can reduce that, we get real value in lots of different ways. So we looked at a very specific area in a very specific pain point, and it was really around the process. It's like, what do we want that process to be? And that really then reinforces that we wanted to draw the lines. We wanted to do that line drawing faster. We wanted to identify windows faster. We wanted to identify door frames faster. If we can do that, then we can get to the value that the human is providing more quickly. And that to me is like the benefit for AI is getting to the human value more quickly.
Yeah.
And so I would start with that. I would also say you really should start putting in your budget. For those people who are on calendar year budgets, you should be starting to budget for something in AI for next year. If you don't have an AI specific budget, and don't put it in your innovation budget, don't put it in your, you know, nice to have budget. Put it in your IT or in your overhead budget that's we're going to be paying for this. We're going to make a real commitment because you need to do that. I'd recommend looking at the cost of buying some sort of, you know, broader version of one of the models, ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or one of those guys for the organization. It's going to help you reinforce those guardrails. Look at consulting dollars that you might be wanting to spend. Look at also, I think this goes back to what you were saying. Maybe bring in somebody to take a look at your data because
Yeah.
like as a precursor to doing a whole bunch of AI analysis on a whole bunch of data, let's see where our data is right now. And there's some really great people out there who will come in and say, this
Yeah.
is where you need to start. And,
Yeah.
you know, for us, because we started in sort of a more experimental phase where we're experimenting, um, uh, we have tripped over the data and are like, oh crap, that's where we need to start. But one other thing that I want to make sure that I put out there is don't feel like you have to hold yourself to a really to a change management approach that has worked for you before. Like very in-depth, very well thought out change management is great if the underlying technology isn't changing fast. Our biggest problem right now is we're phasing everything and keeping up with that phases. I'm building another phase back at the very beginning because I have 10% of the company that's innovators. I have 30% of the company that are, like early adopters. Then I have 60% that I'm bringing along. I'm building a 1% to like look a year ahead to say where do we need to be, and we're starting to build structures and for each of those teams to be able to pull down what's available as they have the capability to do that.
Yeah.
So don't try to like do a really thoroughgoing change management process because you're going to find that by the time you release something, you're a year behind where the state of the art is, and it's changing so fast.
And I think everybody gets wrapped up in that whole thing. We were going to talk about, kind of like what's your buzzword filter, AI powered solutions, those kind of things. Because they're out there, right? There's folks that
Yes.
are trying to sell you on their, and they may not have it developed yet. This is where I find that conflict between the software industry and the construction industry. Construction industry says, I need this tool, right?
Hmm.
You give me a drill, you give me a hammer, you give me a backhoe, I need to see that thing working today, right? Software industry says, oh yeah, we've got that, right? We've got that tool, right? It's in beta, but yeah, we've got it, and we need to work on it. It's not like driving a backhoe onto a field and start digging. It's
Hmm.
not the same. It would be like we drive the backhoe onto the field and then be like, yeah, well, I haven't really worked that hydraulic, portion out just yet. We were gonna, it doesn't lift it quite as much. It's not quite as doesn't dig quite as much as we wanted to, but we've got a couple of options here that we want to put in. And I think that's the disconnect between what software tech, companies are trying to do versus what construction is used to when it comes to buying or implementing a project.
Yeah, and I think that that's interesting because that definitely is part of the challenge is that, it's the 80/20 rule in software, which is, you launch with 80% of it right. And, we're not comfortable with that in this industry.
Yeah,
We
nobody
need
is.
99%, 99.99% because we're a safety sensitive industry. We cannot put something in people's hands that's 80% okay if we're building something that's important. Like, you know, goodness sakes, there have been enough situations where people have tried to do 80% and we've had catastrophic failures. But the other thing too is oftentimes we're seeing AI as really just like an overlay or an add-on to something that delivers value supposedly somewhere else. And this is where I think having a little bit uh, uh, of some questions in your back pocket to ask is helpful. The first question you ask is what model are you using and how are you training it? And and then you say, what specifically is it going to do to increase the value of your product? And if they can't articulate it specifically, if they lots of times what you'll get is you get, oh, well, it's going to save you a ton of time when you're looking for something. Well, is that really going to save me a ton of time? And how much time over how many people? You'll often get software vendors who are making claims about, well, we'll save like 5 minutes a day for everybody in your organization. And the studies have shown that that 5 minutes a day doesn't get spent on some sort of massive new project or because it doesn't add up. It's just 5 minutes a day where you're like, okay, who's the starting quarterback this weekend for the Saints? And of course, we have no idea because, like,
Well, yeah,
that's a whole nother story.
preseason.
But this is not going to age well because maybe we'll actually have the starter named by the beginning of the season. But the other thing, and I might have shared this with you before, is that there's an old joke that the difference between a used car salesman and a software salesman is that the used car salesman knows that he's lying. And most of the time, the software people don't know AI well enough to know that they're not telling the truth. They don't. I had a conversation last week with a company that where they are very smart and they're very good and they're like, oh, Adam, we read your stuff all the time. Like, okay, if I know more about AI than you do, then maybe you shouldn't be talking to me. Like, I would have probably already selected you if because I have a pretty good sense of what's out there and I also write about it all the time. So, if I know more than you do, then your AI tool is probably not something that's going to help.
Yeah, well, there's not too many people that are going to, exceed in your knowledge of the AI tools just because of your extensive research. So I got to give
But
them a little bit of a pass on that
Well,
one.
I maybe a little bit, but what I'm saying is that make sure that they don't they're not snowing you. Make sure that it's something that's core to the function. I've been in meetings where people have said, "Oh, well, look at on this sidebar, we have this really great, enhanced AI search tool." And you look at it, you're like, "Well, what does it do? How is that going to help me with the specifics of what your tool does?"
Yeah.
And, I don't, I think a lot of times people, they just added on a chat bot to the side and then that's AI. The folks who are actually using the AI tools to drive real outcomes, you'll know. They'll be like, okay, this is exactly what it does. Let me walk you through what it does, and let me walk you through how we've configured it to be better than you typing into ChatGPT and getting the same kind of answer.
I want you to repeat that one more time because I think we had a little glitch there in the thing. So
Okay, sure. So the make sure that you're asking your vendors what specifically they're providing because the ones that have created AI tools that really fulfill the need, they will tell you exactly how they've configured it. They'll tell you what model it is, and they will be able to provide you with detail that most everybody else will not be able to provide. And if you get the answer, well, we've just used a large language model to provide search, that's no better than you go and typing that into ChatGPT.
Yeah.
There's no reason for you to be spending additional money on this. And my frustration as a consumer of these tools is I know that is going to hit my bottom line at some point
Hmm.
because I know that they're going to say, oh, well, we've added an AI tool to this, otherwise not AI tool,
Right. Well, they've
and
had to
we're going to
add,
pass the
yeah.
cost on to you. Of course, they're
Right.
going to do that.
They've added on some engineers and whatever
Yes.
they've done to, kind of augment their system as best that they can and do what they do. I get it. Um, you know, the director of information technology position is kind of seems to be ever expanding into these realms of discussion. Are there other roles? Because I know you're not just the director of information technology. Your title is a bit of a paragraph. Is this something where I guess at some point where will there be separate roles at some point for those types of things where one is kind of a functionality, one is directly with AI or with the kind of artificial intelligence group. What are your thoughts?
I think so. I think we're going to see a period where, you know, it, and there's a lot of conversation about that this week because of ChatGPT 5 coming out and it doing good things, but not like blowing everybody's mind
Yeah,
like
yeah. It's not the Death
ChatGPT
Star,
did the
right?
first, the
Right.
Death Star thing was a little bit silly, but the the onus for those of us in the construction industry is to say, okay, where we're at now, how can we use this? How can we use this more than 7 or 8% of the company using it? Because that's probably where most of us are. I mean, and if we're honest, it's probably a little bit lower than that. And I was in a meeting today, and the president was talking about how we can't let up the gas. We've done some great things, but we've got to keep going with AI because it's always changing. I think that there are going to need to be people who are deep in the process, who understand the pain point and can adapt AI to that pain point. That's one of the reasons why we've structured our teams the way we have. We have a steering committee where we have, people from legal, we have vice presidents, we have project folks, we have superintendents, and then we have like an innovation team with the people who are actually in the trenches doing the work and
Yeah,
uncovering the solutions. Because then we can build the solutions for the folks who are in the trenches or give them the tools to build it themselves.
yeah. And so I think that's a great point to kind of, stop on there because I really feel like you kind of hit it on the head. And when we start to look at AI, we have to work with it, but we have to get people involved with it. And that's the people, not necessarily those people in the trenches. They've got to be involved. They've got to have their say. Because again, the only way we're going to know if AI is right or wrong at some point is from human experience, right?
Yep.
Because this is a human endeavor, what we're doing here. And construction is a human endeavor. It's not an AI endeavor. And AIs, I don't think, may have any interest in building anything, but humans do, right? We need roads, we need buildings, we need shelter, we need power, we need all those things. So, Adam, thanks so much for being with me today. Again, and we're gonna do this again. I'm sure I'm going to be reaching back out to you within a few months. But I really do appreciate your time here today.
As always, Robert, it's a great conversation and look forward to the next one.
All right, man. Well, Everybody, this is Adam Krob. If you guys do get a chance, I want you to check out his LinkedIn profile. He's got tons of newsletters in there that if you want to know more about AI, he is the man when it comes to writing about it and knowing what's out there. So I think that would be a great effort. Adam, thanks again. And we're going to see you next time on the ConTech Exec podcast.